His lawyer stood up, adjusted his cufflinks, and said, "Your Honor, the prosecution's only witness is legally blind. She cannot identify my client. She cannot describe what she saw, because she did not see anything. She is blind." He said the word blind like it was the end of the argument, like it was a door he had just closed and locked. The judge looked at me. I was sitting in the witness area with my white cane folded across my lap and my phone in my hand, the phone that had been recording the entire time. I could feel the whole courtroom staring at me, that particular quality of silence that happens when a room full of people are looking at someone and trying to figure out if she matters. My name is Noel. I am 33 years old. I have been blind since I was 14, and I'm about to tell you the story of how a man who killed a woman with his car almost got away with it, because he assumed the only person nearby could not see. He was right. I could not see, but I heard everything, and my phone heard it too. Let me start with the blindness, because people always want to know and because it matters to the story. I was not born blind. I had perfect vision until I was 13. I played soccer. I read books with actual pages. I watched movies and recognized faces and saw colors and never once thought about what it would mean to lose all of that. When I was 13, I started getting headaches, bad ones, the kind that made me see spots and made the light feel like it was stabbing me. My parents took me to the doctor. The doctor sent me to a specialist. The specialist ran tests. The tests showed a tumor pressing on my optic nerve. They operated. The tumor was benign. I was lucky, they said. Lucky because the tumor was not cancer. Unlucky because the surgery damaged the nerve beyond repair. Over the course of 6 months, my vision faded. First the edges went blurry. Then the colors dulled. Then the details dissolved. Faces became shapes. Shapes became shadows. Shadows became gray. And gray became nothing. By my 14th birthday, I was completely blind. I will not lie to you and say I handled it with grace. I did not. I was 14. I was angry. I screamed at my parents. I threw things. I locked myself in my room for days. I refused to learn Braille because learning Braille meant accepting that this was permanent, and I was not ready to accept that. But my mother, a woman named Gloria, who stood 5 feet, 2 inches tall, and had never backed down from anything in her life, was not going to let me disappear. She showed up at my bedroom door every morning at 7 and said, "Get up, we have work to do." She enrolled me in orientation and mobility training. She hired a tutor who taught me to use screen readers and voice software. She found a blind musician who taught me to play piano by ear. She said, "You lost your eyes, Noel. You did not lose yourself." Over time, I adapted. I built a new way of experiencing the world, a world made of sounds and textures and smells and spatial awareness and the subtle shifts in air pressure that tell you someone just walked into a room. I learned to identify people by their footsteps. I learned to navigate streets by the echo patterns of buildings. I learned to cook by touch and smell and the sound of oil in a pan. And I developed a habit that would eventually become the most important thing I ever did. I started recording audio diaries on my phone. Every day, I would open the voice memo app and narrate my experience, what I heard, what I felt, what I noticed. I started doing it as a coping mechanism. My therapist suggested it when I was 15, but it became more than that. It became my way of seeing. Instead of photographs, I had recordings. Instead of a visual memory, I had an audio archive. Thousands of recordings, going back 18 years. I left the recorder running almost all the time when I was outside. It became automatic, the way a sighted person glances around without thinking. I pressed record without thinking. It captured everything. Conversations, traffic, birds, rain, arguments overheard on the subway, street musicians, the rumble of a garbage truck at 6 in the morning. My phone was my eyes, and it never blinked. Now let me tell you about October 14th. I was walking home from a piano lesson at 7:45 in the evening. The route was one I had walked hundreds of times. Down Marlow Street, past the dry cleaner, left on Birch, past the small park, then 3 blocks to my apartment. I knew every crack in the sidewalk. I knew where the curb dipped at the crosswalk. I knew that the streetlight at Birch and 3rd made a faint buzzing sound that told me exactly where I was. I was on Birch, about 20 feet from the crosswalk at 3rd, when I heard it. First, an engine, moving fast, too fast for a residential street. The pitch told me the car was accelerating, not cruising. I have spent 19 years calibrating my hearing to traffic patterns. I know the difference between a car doing 30 and a car doing 50 by the sound of the tires on asphalt. This car was doing at least 50, then a sound I will never forget. A dull, heavy impact, not metal on metal, something softer, something worse. The sound a human body makes when it is hit by 2 tons of steel moving at 50 miles an hour. It is a sound that does not exist in movies. Movies get it wrong. It is quieter than you expect and more final, then breaks, not before the impact. After. The screech came after the thud, which meant the driver did not try to stop. He hit her and then he stopped. Then a voice, male, close, maybe 30 feet from me. He said one word, damn, not screamed, not whispered, said, flatly, like he had spilled coffee on his shirt. Then the engine revved again and the car drove away. I heard it accelerate up Birch, turn right on 4th and disappear. The Doppler shift told me the direction, the engine. Sound told me it was a large vehicle, probably an SUV. The tire pattern on wet asphalt told me the tires were wide. Performance tires, not standard. All of this happened in approximately 8 seconds. I processed it the way I process everything, through sound. And my phone, which was in my jacket pocket with the voice memo running, captured every single second. I walked toward the impact site. I could hear someone on the ground. Short, ragged breaths, a gurgling sound that meant fluid in the airways. I knelt down and found her with my hands. A woman. She was lying on her side. Her breathing was shallow and wet. I called 911. I stayed with her. I held her hand. I talked to her even though I do not think she could hear me. I said, help is coming. Stay with me. Help is coming. She died before the ambulance arrived. Her name was Patricia Donovan. She was 58 years old. She was a librarian. She was walking home from a book club meeting at the community center. She had 2 adult children and a golden retriever named Charlie. I learned all of that later. In that moment, she was just a hand going cold in mine and a sound I could not fix. The police came. They took my statement. I told them everything. The speed of the car, the sequence of events, the driver's voice, the direction of departure. They were polite but skeptical. One officer said, "Ma'am, with all due respect, you did not see the vehicle." I said, "No, but I heard it." And my phone recorded it. They took my phone as evidence. The recording was 93 minutes long, my entire walk home from the piano lesson. The relevant portion was about 4 minutes, starting 2 minutes before the impact and ending 2 minutes after. It captured everything I described: the acceleration, the impact, the single word, damn, the engine revving, the departure. The forensic audio team enhanced the recording. They isolated the engine sound and identified it as consistent with a late model Range Rover Sport. They analyzed the tire sound and confirmed wide-profile performance tires. They ran the voice through analysis and determined it was a male between 35 and 50 years old. I want to tell you what it is like to be the only witness to something terrible and have the world tell you that you do not count. After the accident, I gave my statement to the police 3 times. Each time the officer wrote it down, but I could feel the skepticism. They were polite. They said things like, "We appreciate your cooperation," and "Every detail helps." But there was always a pause after I described something, a pause that said, "How would you know that?" The detective assigned to the case, a woman named Martinez, was different. She came to my apartment 2 days after the accident. She sat at my kitchen table and said, "Walk me through it again. Every sound, in order." I did. She did not interrupt. She did not pause. She just listened. When I finished, she said, "You know more about what happened than any sighted witness I have ever interviewed. Most people see an accident and remember colors and shapes. You heard one and remember a sequence of events with timestamps." She was right. Sighted people are overwhelmed by visual information during a crisis. They remember the color of the car, but not the direction it went. They remember the victim's clothing, but not the sound of the impact. Their eyes take in everything, and their brains sort it later, often incorrectly. I do not have that problem. My brain processes sound in real time, the same way a sighted person processes motion. I do not remember what happened at Birch and 3rd. I remember what it sounded like. And sound does not lie. Sound does not get confused by adrenaline. Sound is physics. The recording on my phone confirmed everything I told Martinez. She became my biggest advocate. She went to the district attorney and said, "This witness is more reliable than a dash cam." The DA was skeptical until she heard the recording. Then she was not, but the defense was ready for us. Preston Hale had handled DUI cases for wealthy clients before. His strategy was always the same: discredit the evidence, discredit the witness, create doubt. With me, he thought he had an easy target, a blind woman on a witness stand. All he had to do was say the word blind enough times, and the jury would do the rest. He underestimated me, and he underestimated what 19 years of listening can teach a person about the truth. 2 weeks later, the police arrested a man named Gregory Whitfield. He was 43 years old. He was a real estate developer. He He drove a black Range Rover Sport with Continental Performance tires. He lived 4 blocks from the intersection where Patricia was killed. His blood alcohol level at the time of arrest, 14 days after the incident, was 0. But a receipt from a wine bar 2 blocks from the crash site, time-stamped at 7:21 on October 14th, showed he had ordered 4 glasses of Cabernet. He left the bar at approximately 7:35. The crash happened at approximately 7:47. 12 minutes and 4 glasses of wine. Whitfield denied everything. He told the police he was home all evening. He told his insurance company, which Patricia's family had filed a claim against, that he was not in the area. His lawyer, a man named Preston Hale, filed a motion to exclude my testimony entirely. He argued that a blind witness could not provide reliable identification and that the audio recording was ambiguous environmental noise. The case went to trial. I was called as the prosecution's primary witness. Preston Hale went after me immediately. He stood in front of the witness box and said, "Ms. Chambers, you are legally blind, correct? Yes? You cannot see the defendant sitting in this courtroom? No. You cannot identify his face? No. You cannot describe what his car looked like? No." He turned to the jury. "Your Honor, the prosecution's only witness is legally blind. She cannot identify my client. She cannot describe what she saw because she did not see anything." He sat down like the case was over. The prosecutor, a woman named Dana Whitfield, no relation to the defendant, stood up. She asked me to describe what happened on the evening of October the 14th. I described everything: the walk, the engine, the acceleration, the impact, the voice, the departure. Then she played the recording. The courtroom heard it all. The footsteps, mine. The distant engine getting louder. The acceleration, the impact, that dull, terrible sound. Then the voice, clear as glass. A man's voice. Damn. Then the engine revving. Then tires on wet asphalt, pulling away. Then my footsteps, faster now, moving toward the body. Then my voice, shaking, on the phone with 911. The jury was absolutely still. Dana then called the forensic audio expert, who testified that the engine sound was consistent with a Range Rover Sport and that the voice print analysis had a 91% probability match with Gregory Whitfield's recorded voice samples. She also presented the wine bar receipt, the GPS data from Whitfield's phone, which he had forgotten to turn off and which placed him at the intersection at 7:47, and testimony from the bartender who confirmed Whitfield had been drinking heavily and left in a hurry. Preston Hale tried to recover. He argued the recording was inconclusive. He argued that engine sounds are not fingerprints. He argued that damn is not a confession. Dana stood up for redirect. She looked at me and asked one final question. "Ms. Chambers, you have been blind for 19 years. In that time, you have built an entire life around listening. You navigate the world through sound. You recognize people by their footsteps. You identify cars by their engines. In your expert opinion, not as an eyewitness, but as someone whose survival depends on the accuracy of her hearing. What happened at the corner of Birch and 3rd on the evening of October 14th? I took a breath. A large SUV, traveling at approximately 50 miles per hour, struck a pedestrian in the crosswalk. The driver did not brake before impact. After the collision, the driver said a single word, "Damn," in a tone that indicated surprise but not distress. Then he accelerated and left the scene. The vehicle turned right on 4th Street, heading north. The entire event lasted approximately 8 seconds. I paused. The driver did not stop to help. He did not call for help. He hit a woman and drove away. I could not see him, but I was 10 meters away, and I have spent 19 years learning to hear what other people miss. I heard him, and my phone heard him, and the woman he hit died holding my hand because he was too much of a coward to hold it himself. The courtroom was silent. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. They found Gregory Whitfield guilty of vehicular manslaughter and hit and run. He was sentenced to 12 years. After the verdict, Patricia's daughter, a woman named Sarah, found me in the hallway. She hugged me. She said, "You were the last person to hold her hand." "I know," I said. "Thank you for staying with her. I was not going to leave her alone." Sarah asked me something that I think about often. She said, "What did it sound like? Her last breath?" I did not answer right away, because the truth is, I have that recording. I have listened to it once. I will never listen to it again, but I remember the sound. It was quiet, barely there, like a whisper that did not have enough air behind it. It sounded like she was trying to say something. I said, "I do not know what, but I think she knew someone was there." Sarah cried. I held her hand the way I had held Patricia's. I still walk the same route home from my piano lessons. I still pass the corner of Birch and 3rd. There is a memorial there now, flowers and a photograph, and a small wooden cross. I cannot see it, but I can smell the flowers when they are fresh. And every time I pass that corner, I press record, not because I expect something to happen, but because I learned on October 14th that the world is full of sounds that matter, sounds that prove what happened, sounds that hold people accountable, sounds that say, I was here, I heard it, and I will not let you pretend it did not happen. My name is Noel Chambers. I am blind. I cannot see the stars or the sunrise or the face of the woman I held as she died. But I hear things that sighted people walk right past. I hear the truth in a world full of noise. And sometimes, just sometimes, a phone recording and a pair of ears are more powerful than a room full of eyes. If you are listening to this and you feel invisible because of a disability, because of what the world assumes you cannot do, remember that invisibility is a kind of power. People say things in front of you that they would never say to your face. They act in front of you like you are not there. And when the time comes, you can stand up and say, I was there. I heard everything. And here is the proof. Keep recording. Keep listening. The truth has a sound, and you are the one who hears it. My father died on a Monday. I found the letters on a Thursday, 41 envelopes, bound with a rubber band, hidden in a locked box at the bottom of his closet behind 3 pairs of shoes he never wore. Each one was addressed to him. Each one was from a woman named Ruth Whitmore. Each one begged him to let her see me, and each one was stamped with a return address in a state I had never been to, written by a woman I had been told was dead. My name is Camille. I am 35 years old, and for 35 years my father told me my mother died giving birth to me. He said she hemorrhaged during delivery. He said the doctors could not stop the bleeding. He said she held me once before she closed her eyes, and the last thing she said was my name. It was a beautiful story. I carried it my entire life like a locket around my neck. The idea that my mother loved me so much that the last word she ever spoke was mine. It was a lie, every word of it. My father, Henry Whitmore, was a quiet man, an accountant. He wore pressed shirts and polished shoes and kept his desk organized with the precision of someone who believed chaos was a character flaw. He raised me alone in a house that was always clean and always quiet. He made breakfast every morning, eggs and toast, never anything else. He drove me to school. He attended every event. He was present in every way a father can be physically present. But he never talked about my mother. Not really. If I asked questions, he gave the same 3 answers. She was beautiful. She loved you. She did not make it. Then he would change the subject with the gentleness of a man closing a door. He did not want you to see behind. I accepted it the way children accept things their parents tell them. Children do not have the tools to question grief. When your father cries at the mention of your mother's name, you do not push. You learn very early that some doors stay closed and you stop knocking. I grew up believing I was the reason my mother died. Nobody told me that directly, but the math was simple. She died giving birth to me. If I had not been born, she would have lived. I carried that weight for decades. It shaped everything. My relationships, my self-worth, my constant need to earn the right to exist. If my birth cost someone their life, then my life had better be worth the price. When my father passed, a heart attack at 67, quick and sudden, the way he did everything, I was the one who cleared out the house. He had no siblings. My mother, I believed, had no family. It was just me. The closet was the last thing I tackled. 3 days into cleaning, exhausted and raw, I pulled out his shoes, his suits, his boxes of tax returns, going back 30 years. And at the very bottom, behind a pair of brown loafers, still in the box, I found a metal lockbox. It was locked. I found the key in his nightstand drawer, taped to the underside of the top shelf, hidden so deliberately that it could only have been hidden by someone who expected to be the only one who ever opened it. I opened the box. Inside were 41 envelopes, all addressed to Henry Whitmore, all from Ruth Whitmore, all postmarked over 34 years. The first one dated 2 months after I was born, the last one sent 11 months ago. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open the first letter. It was short, handwritten on lined paper. It said, Henry, please, I just want to see her. I just want to know she is okay. You cannot do this. She is my daughter too. Please, let me see her. Ruth. I opened the second letter. Henry, I called the number you gave me. It is disconnected. I went to the address. You moved. I do not know where you are. Please, if you read this, let me see Camille. I am begging you. I opened a 3rd, a 4th, a 10th, a 20th. The letters spanned decades. They tracked a woman's life through the lens of a single, unrelenting pain. Ruth got a new job. Ruth moved to a new apartment. Ruth got married again, and then divorced. Ruth got sick, and then got better. Ruth's handwriting changed over the years, steadier in the early letters, shakier in the later ones. But the message never changed. Let me see my daughter. Let me see Camille. Please, please, please. The later letters were worse, not because they were angry, because they were resigned. One from 12 years ago said, "She must be 23 now. I wonder what she looks like. I wonder if she looks like me. I wonder if she knows I exist. I wonder if you told her I died." He did. He told me exactly that. The most recent letter, sent 11 months before my father died, said, "Henry, I am 57 years old. I have spent 34 years writing to a man who never writes back. I have spent 34 years missing a child I held once. I do not know if you keep these letters. I do not know if you read them, but I write them because stopping would mean accepting that she is gone forever, and I cannot do that. She has a mother. She has always had a mother, and one day, somehow she will know." I sat on the floor of my father's closet for 2 hours. I read every letter. Then I read them again. Then I held them against my chest and screamed. Not cried, screamed. The kind of scream that comes from a place so deep inside you that you did not know it existed until something tears it open. My mother was alive. She had been alive the entire time. She lived 3 states away. She had been writing to my father for 34 years, and he had kept every letter in a locked box behind his shoes and never told me. I found her. It took 2 days. Her name was Ruth Whitmore. She had kept his last name, which made me cry for reasons I cannot fully explain. She was living in a small apartment in Asheville, North Carolina. She worked part-time at a bookstore. She was 57 years old. I called her on a Sunday evening. She answered on the second ring. I said, "My name is Camille Whitmore. I think you are my mother." The silence on the other end lasted long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard a sound. Not a word. A sound. The sound a human being makes when something they have been waiting for their entire life finally arrives. She said, "Oh my God. Oh my God. Camille?" "Yes. He told you. He finally told you." "No. He died. I found your letters." Another silence. Then she said, "Can I see you? Please. Can I please see you?" I drove to Asheville the next day. 7 hours. I did not stop. When I pulled up to her apartment and knocked on the door, it opened immediately. She had been standing behind it, waiting, the way she had been waiting for 35 years. She looked like me. That was the first thing I noticed. The same jaw, the same nose, the same way of standing slightly tilted to one side. She was smaller than I expected, thinner. Her hair was gray and pulled back in a clip. Her eyes were red. She said, "You are beautiful." I said, "You are alive." We stood in the doorway and held each other for what felt like an hour. It might have been 5 minutes. It might have been longer. Time does not work properly when the thing you have been grieving for your entire life is suddenly breathing in your arms. Over the next several days, she told me everything. She and my father had been married for 3 years. The marriage was bad, not violent, but controlling. My father was jealous, possessive. He monitored her phone calls, her friendships, her schedule. When she got pregnant, things got worse. He accused her of infidelity. He demanded a paternity test. She refused. He became withdrawn and cold. After I was born, Ruth developed postpartum depression. She struggled. She asked for help. My father's response was to file for emergency custody, claiming she was mentally unfit. He had a lawyer. She did not. The judge granted temporary custody to my father. Ruth was given supervised visitation once a week. Then my father moved. He left the state without telling her. He changed his phone number. He enrolled me in a school under a slightly different spelling of our name. He disappeared, and he told me my mother was dead. Ruth spent the next 3 decades trying to find us. She hired a private investigator twice, but could not afford to continue. She filed motions in family court, but my father never responded, and the courts in that era were less aggressive about enforcement. She wrote letters, the letters I found, to the last address she had for him, hoping they would be forwarded. Some of them were forwarded. My father received them, all 41. He read them. I know this because several had notes in the margins in his handwriting, brief annotations like received and a date. He read them, noted them, and locked them in a box. Together, Ruth and I filed a lawsuit against my father's estate, not for money. For the record, we wanted a court to acknowledge what he had done. Our attorney, a woman named Simone Delacroix, argued that my father had committed parental alienation on a scale that constituted fraud. 35 years of deliberate deception that deprived both mother and daughter of a relationship. The hearing was in February. I sat at the table with Ruth beside me. It was the first time we had been in the same room with other people. She held my hand under the table. Her grip was strong, stronger than I expected for a woman who looked so fragile. The estate was represented by a court-appointed administrator, since my father had no other heirs. The administrator did not contest our claims. He simply presented the facts of the estate and let the judge decide. Simone presented the letters, all 41. She presented the private investigator reports showing Ruth's efforts to find us. She presented the court records from the original custody case, showing that Ruth had never been found unfit, only that temporary custody was granted and never revisited because my father fled the jurisdiction. Then she asked Ruth to read the last letter, the one sent 11 months before my father died. Ruth stood. She was trembling. She unfolded the letter carefully, the way you handle something precious and fragile. Henry, I am 57 years old. I have spent 34 years writing to a man who never writes back. Her voice cracked, but she continued. I have spent 34 years missing a child I held once. I held her for 11 minutes. They counted. 11 minutes before you took her from my arms and told the nurse I needed to rest. I did not need to rest. I needed my daughter. She paused. The courtroom was completely still. I do not know if you keep these letters. I do not know if you read them. But I write them because stopping would mean accepting that she is gone forever, and I cannot do that. She has a mother. She has always had a mother, and one day, somehow she will know. Ruth set the letter down. She looked at me. She said quietly, not to the court but to me, "You know now, the judge ruled in our favor." She formally acknowledged the parental alienation and entered it into the public record. She awarded Ruth a symbolic judgment against the estate, $1. Because Ruth said she did not want money. She wanted acknowledgement. She wanted a court to say, out loud, that what Henry did was wrong. The judge said, what happened in this case is not a custody dispute. It is a theft. Mr. Whitmore stole 35 years from his daughter and 35 years from her mother. No ruling can return those years. But this court can say, for the record, that they mattered, that they were taken, and that the woman who spent 3 decades writing letters to a locked box deserved to be heard. Ruth and I walked out of the courthouse together. It was February, cold, gray, the kind of day that feels like the sky forgot to turn on. She said, I missed your first day of school. I said, I missed yours too. She laughed. I laughed. And then we both cried, standing on the courthouse steps in February, because 35 years is a long time and there is no graceful way to start making up for it. We live close to each other now. I moved to Asheville. I got a job at a non-profit that reunites families separated by the system. The irony is not lost on me. It never is. Ruth and I have dinner every Thursday. She is teaching me to cook the recipes she would have taught me as a child. She is a terrible cook, which I find hilarious and perfect. I need to tell you about the first Thursday dinner with Ruth, because it is the moment I understood what 35 years of absence actually looks like. She had tried to make chicken parmesan. She told me later it was the first recipe she looked up when she found out I was coming. She Googled, what do 35-year-olds like to eat? And chicken parmesan was the top result. She bought fresh mozzarella and San Marzano tomatoes and panko breadcrumbs because she wanted it to be perfect. It was not perfect. The chicken was overcooked. The sauce was too salty. The mozzarella had not fully melted. She apologized 3 times before I even sat down. I am not a good cook, she said. I never learned properly. I imagined I would teach you to cook when you were young, that we would learn together. She stopped herself because she realized what she was saying, that the cooking lessons she had imagined were the same cooking lessons she had missed. 35 years of Thursday dinners she never got to burn. I picked up my fork and took a bite. The chicken was tough and the sauce needed something, and it was the best meal I had ever eaten in my life. It is perfect, I said. She looked at me. You are lying. I am absolutely lying. It is terrible, but you made it for me, and nobody has ever made me a bad chicken parmesan before, so it is perfect. She laughed. A real laugh, the kind that starts in your belly and takes over your whole body. And then she cried, and then she laughed again, and I realized that this is what healing looks like. It is not one thing. It is everything at once. The laughter and the tears and the burned chicken and the years you cannot get back and the Thursday nights you still have left. We cook together every week now. She is getting better. The chicken parmesan last month was actually good. I did not tell her. I told her it was terrible. She laughed every time. It has become our thing. Some people build relationships over years of shared history. We are building ours over burned garlic and bad wine and the quiet understanding that we are starting at 0 and that is okay. 0 is still the beginning. We do not talk about my father much. There is not much to say. He was a man who loved me enough to raise me alone and hated my mother enough to erase her from my life. Those 2 things are both true. I do not know how to reconcile them. I am not sure I ever will, but I know this. Every Thursday night sitting in my mother's kitchen, watching her burn garlic and laugh about it, I feel something I have never felt before. Whole, not complete. You cannot be complete when 35 years are missing, but whole, like a sentence that finally has its last word. If you are listening to this and you have been kept from someone you love, a child, a parent, a sibling, by another person's decision, please keep writing, keep calling, keep trying. Even if the letters come back, even if the phone goes to voicemail, even if decades pass and the world tells you to give up, because somewhere on the other side of a locked box, there is a person who needs those letters, and one day they will find them, and when they do, they will know what you always wanted them to know. You were there. You were always there, and you never stopped. My biological father sat across from me in that courtroom and said, I am her father. I have rights. He said it with the confidence of a man who had spent 24 years pretending I did not exist, and then suddenly remembered I did when he found out there was money involved. The judge looked at him, then at me, then at the document his own lawyer had just entered into evidence, a handwritten receipt from 1999 that said, in his handwriting, received $50,000. The girl is theirs now. That is the story of how I was sold, and this is the story of how I proved it. My name is Ava. I am 28 years old. I grew up in a yellow house on a cul-de-sac in a small town in Michigan with two parents who loved me more than anything in the world. Their names were Thomas and Helen Park. They were school teachers. He taught 6th grade science. She taught 3rd grade reading. They were the kind of people who spent their Saturday mornings at farmers markets and their Sunday evenings playing board games in the living room. I was their only child. I was, as far as I knew, their biological child. I had Helen's smile and Thomas's stubbornness and the kind of childhood that made adulthood feel like a disappointment because nothing would ever be that simple again. They never told me I was adopted. Not formally adopted. That is the important part. There were no court documents, no agency, no legal process, because what happened was not an adoption. It was a transaction. I found out when I was 24. Thomas and Helen had both passed. Thomas from a stroke when I was 20. Helen from breast cancer when I was 23. I was cleaning out their house, the yellow house where I had grown up, when I found a metal safe in the back of the garage. I knew the combination because Helen had taped it to the bottom of her jewelry box, the way she taped important numbers to things she knew I would eventually find. Inside the safe were 3 things: a birth certificate, my birth certificate, with the name Baby Girl Pruitt on it, not Ava Park, a handwritten letter from Helen to me, explaining everything, and a receipt. The receipt was on plain white paper, written in blue ink. It said, received $50,000 from Thomas and Helen Park for the transfer of custody of baby girl Pruitt, born March 3rd, 1997. Signed, Dale Pruitt. I need to tell you about the day I realized Thomas and Helen were not just good parents. They were extraordinary parents who carried a secret every single day of my life. When I was 16, I had a biology class that covered genetics. We did Punnett squares. We learned about dominant and recessive traits. The teacher had us look at our parents' eye colors and predict our own. Helen had brown eyes. Thomas had blue. I had green. The teacher said green eyes from that combination were unusual but possible. I did not think anything of it, but when I came home and told Helen about the lesson, she went very quiet. She was stirring something on the stove and her hand stopped moving for just a moment. Then she said, "Genetics is complicated, sweetheart." And she changed the subject. I filed that moment away the way teenagers file things, in the back of my mind, behind more important things like school dances and driver's licenses. I did not think about it again until I opened that safe 8 years later. After I read Helen's letter and found the receipt, I sat in the garage for a long time. I tried to feel angry at Thomas and Helen. I tried to feel betrayed, but all I could feel was the weight of what they had done, not the transaction, but everything after it. 28 years of love built on a foundation they knew was cracked. Every bedtime story, every packed lunch, every time Helen braided my hair before school, all of it done with the knowledge that someday I might find out how it started and that it might destroy everything. They carried that fear every single day, and they loved me anyway. That is not a small thing. That is an act of courage that most people cannot even imagine. Thomas once said to me when I was about 12, "Ava, every family has a story about how it began. Some stories are simple, some are complicated, but the only part that matters is what happens after the beginning." I thought he was talking about his own parents. He was talking about us. Dale Pruitt, my biological father, a man I had never heard of. Helen's letter filled in the rest. She and Thomas could not have children. They had tried for 8 years. IVF, fertility treatments, prayers. Nothing worked. They were 37 and running out of options when a colleague of Thomas's mentioned a man named Dale Pruitt, a construction worker in a nearby town whose girlfriend had just had a baby she did not want. The girlfriend had already left. Dale was 22. Broke, and had no interest in raising a child. Thomas met Dale at a diner. Dale said, "I will give you the kid for $50,000. Thomas said, "That is not how this works." Dale said, "That is how it works if you want her." They paid cash over 3 installments. They brought me home when I was 6 weeks old. They raised me as their own. They loved me as their own. They were my parents in every way that mattered and in no way that was legal. They never formalized the adoption because doing so would have meant revealing how they obtained me. They were teachers. They were terrified of losing their jobs. their reputations, their daughter. So they kept the receipt in a safe and the secret in their hearts and hoped that nobody would ever ask. Nobody did until Thomas and Helen both died, and their estate, the Yellow House, their savings, their retirement accounts, approximately $320,000 total, passed to me as their sole beneficiary. That is when Dale Pruitt reappeared. I do not know how he found out about the money. Maybe he saw the obituary. Maybe someone in town talked. But 8 months after Helen died, I received a legal notice. Dale Pruitt was filing a claim against the estate of Thomas and Helen Park, arguing that the transfer of custody was never legally completed and that he retained parental rights over me. He was demanding fair compensation for the loss of his parental relationship, specifically half the estate. He was suing for $160,000 for a daughter he sold for $50,000, a daughter whose name he did not know until a lawyer told him there was money on the table. I hired an attorney named Catherine Cho. She was a family law specialist who had handled illegal adoption cases before. She was horrified and fascinated in equal measure, which seemed like a good combination for a lawyer. Catherine's strategy was straightforward. She argued that Dale had voluntarily relinquished custody through a private transaction. Illegal, yes, but voluntary. That he had made no attempt to contact me in 28 years. That he had no relationship with me. That his claim was motivated entirely by financial interest. Dale's lawyer, a man named Robert Finch, argued the opposite. He said the transaction was illegal and therefore void. That custody had never been legally transferred, that Dale retained his rights as a biological parent, and that the estate of Thomas and Helen Park, built partly on the illegal acquisition of a child, owed restitution. It was a clever argument, disgusting but clever. Use the illegality of the sale to invalidate the custody, then use the invalid custody to claim the inheritance. The hearing was in June. I drove to the courthouse in Thomas's old car, a beige Volvo with a faded bumper sticker that said, "Proud Teacher." I parked in the lot and sat for a minute, looking at the bumper sticker. Thomas would have hated this. He would have been mortified that the secret he kept for 28 years was about to be read aloud in a courtroom. But he was not here to be mortified. He was not here to protect me, so I would have to protect myself. Dale was already inside when I arrived. I had never seen him before. He was 50 years old, heavy-set, wearing a flannel shirt and work boots. He did not look at me. He looked at his lawyer. He looked at his phone. He looked everywhere except at the daughter he sold for $50,000. Finch went first. He presented the birth certificate. Baby girl, Pruitt. He argued that I was, legally and biologically, Dale's daughter. He argued that no court had ever terminated his parental rights. He argued that the $50,000 was an informal arrangement that does not constitute a legal relinquishment of paternity. Then he said, "My client has rights. He is this woman's father." Catherine stood up. She presented Helen's letter. She read it out loud, the story of how they found Dale, how they paid him, how they brought me home, how they raised me. She presented the receipt. Then she placed the receipt on the evidence table and asked the judge to examine it. "Your Honor, this document, written in Mr. Pruitt's own handwriting, states, and I quote, received $50,000. The girl is theirs now." She looked at Dale. "The girl is theirs now." She argued that regardless of the legality of the transaction, Dale's intent was clear. He accepted money. He surrendered custody. He made no attempt to contact me for 28 years. He did not know my name, my birthday, my school, my interests, or anything about me. "Mr. Pruitt is not seeking a relationship with his daughter," Catherine said. "He is seeking a check, the same way he sought a check 28 years ago." She also presented evidence that Dale had a history of financial manipulation, 2 prior fraud convictions, a bankruptcy filing, and a restraining order from an ex-girlfriend who accused him of stealing her credit card. The judge looked at Dale. "Mr. Pruitt, I want to ask you a direct question. What is your daughter's middle name?" Dale looked at Finch. Finch looked at the table. I do not know," Dale said. "What school did she attend?" "I do not know." "What does she do for a living?" "I do not know." "Have you ever sent her a birthday card, a letter, a text message, or made any attempt to contact her in 28 years?" "No." The judge took off her glasses. "Mr. Pruitt, this court recognizes that what happened 28 years ago was illegal. A child is not property to be bought and sold. But this court also recognizes that the people who raised this woman, Thomas and Helen Park, did what they did out of love. Misguided love, perhaps. Legally indefensible love, certainly. But love nonetheless." She paused. "You, Mr. Pruitt, sold your daughter. You took the money. You walked away. You did not look back for 28 years. And now you sit in this courtroom and claim parental rights because there is an inheritance at stake." She looked at him steadily. This court will not reward that. Your claim is denied. The estate of Thomas and Helen Park will remain with their daughter, Ava, the daughter they raised, the daughter they loved, the daughter whose middle name, for the record, is Helen, after the woman who chose her. Dale stood up. Finch tried to stop him. He said, "This is not fair. She is my blood." The judge said, "Blood does not make a parent, Mr. Pruitt. Showing up does, and you never showed up." After the hearing, I sat in Thomas's Volvo in the parking lot for a long time. I held the receipt in my hands, the piece of paper that said my life was worth $50,000 to the man who made me. Then I folded it carefully and put it back in the safe. Not because it matters, because it is part of the story. And the story, ugly as it is, brought me to Thomas and Helen, to the Yellow House, to the board games and the farmers markets and the science projects and the bedtime stories. If my beginning was a transaction, my life was not. My life was love. Messy, complicated, legally questionable love. But love. I kept the Yellow House. I live in it now. I teach third grade reading at the same school where Helen taught. I use her lesson plans. I sit at her desk. And every morning, when the kids walk in, I think about what Thomas used to say. Every kid who walks through that door is someone's whole world. Treat them that way. He treated me that way. From the first day he brought me home, and I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of the $50,000 he paid and the 35 years of love that followed. If you are listening to this, and you are adopted, didn't you, formally or informally, legally or not, your parents are the people who raised you. Full stop. The people who fed you and held you and showed up to your school, plays and worried about you at night and cried at your graduation, those are your parents. Biology is a fact. Parenthood is a choice. And the people who chose you are the ones who matter. The old woman's son looked at me from across the courtroom and said, "She brainwashed my mother through a dog." He said it with total seriousness, like it was a legal argument and not the most ridiculous sentence ever spoken in a room with a judge. His lawyer nodded. The judge's face did not change, but I saw her eyebrows rise about 0.5 millimeter, which in judge language is the equivalent of a jaw drop. I was sitting at the table with 6 years of veterinary records, a folder of videos, and the quiet certainty that Edith Monroe, the sharpest, funniest, most stubborn woman I had ever met, had known exactly what she was doing when she left $1.8 million in a trust for her dog. My name is Dr. Priya Silva. I am 30 years old. I am a veterinarian. I specialize in geriatric animal care, older dogs and cats whose owners need help managing chronic conditions, mobility issues, and end-of-life care. I make house calls. I drive a Honda CR-V with a stethoscope on the dashboard and dog treats in the glove box. I am not the kind of person who gets sued for $1.8 million. And yet, let me tell you about Edith because this story does not make sense without her. Edith Monroe was 84 years old when I met her. She was 5 feet tall, weighed about 100 pounds, and had more energy than most people half her age. She lived in a large brick house on Elm Street that she and her husband Walter had bought in 1968. Walter died 10 years before I met her. They had 3 children, Kenneth, Diane, and Walter Jr. All of them lived within 40 minutes of Edith. None of them visited more than twice a year. Edith had a dog named Benny. Benny was a 14-year-old golden retriever with arthritis, a heart murmur, and the sweetest disposition of any animal I have ever treated. When I first met him, he walked over to me, put his head on my knee, and looked up at me with those cloudy brown eyes, and I knew, the way veterinarians sometimes know, that this dog was the center of someone's universe. I started making house calls every 2 weeks. Benny's arthritis needed management, joint supplements, pain medication, gentle exercises. His heart murmur needed monitoring, and Edith needed someone to talk to. The house calls became longer. I would check Benny, adjust his medications, and then Edith would insist I stay for tea. She made terrible tea, too strong, too hot, with too much sugar, but I drank it every time because the tea was not the point. The conversation was the point. Edith told me about Walter, about their first date at a jazz club in 1962, about raising 3 kids in a house that was always too noisy and too full and too chaotic and absolutely perfect. About the garden she and Walter planted the year they moved in. Roses along the fence, tomatoes in the back, a patch of wildflowers that came back every spring whether she wanted them to or not. She also told me about her children, not with bitterness, with a kind of factual sadness that was worse than bitterness because it had no fire left in it. Kenneth was a financial planner who called once a month and talked for exactly 12 minutes. Edith timed it. Diane sent flowers on Mother's Day and Christmas and never any other time. Walter Jr. had not been to the house in 3 years. "They are busy," Edith would say, the same way every neglected parent says it. "They have their own lives." Benny was not busy. Benny was there every day. Every morning, he walked slowly from his bed to the kitchen to wait for his breakfast. Every evening, he curled up on the rug beside Edith's chair while she watched Jeopardy and shouted the answers at the television. Every night, he slept at the foot of her bed, and Edith told me she could hear his breathing in the dark, and it made her feel less alone. I understand why people love dogs the way they do. Dogs do not calculate. They do not weigh options. They do not visit twice a year and call it enough. They are there every day, without conditions, without agendas, without keeping score. Over 6 years, I treated Benny through 2 surgeries, 3 infections, a cancer scare that turned out to be benign, and the slow, inevitable decline that comes with being a very old dog in a very loving home. I adjusted his medications dozens of times. I carried him up the porch steps when his legs stopped working well. I sat on the floor with him during thunderstorms because loud sounds made him shake. Edith watched all of this. She saw me carry her dog. She saw me sit on the floor with him. She saw me cry once, after a particularly bad appointment when I thought we were going to lose him, and she handed me a tissue and said, "Doctors are allowed to cry, dear. It means you care." There was one visit, about 3 years in, that I think about more than any other. It was a Wednesday afternoon in November, cold, gray, the kind of day that makes old bones ache. I arrived for Benny's checkup. Edith met me at the door looking smaller than usual, not physically, emotionally. She was wearing a cardigan that was too big for her and slippers that shuffled on the hardwood floor. "Dr. Silva," she said, "Kenneth called yesterday." "Oh, how is he?" "He told me I should sell the house and move into assisted living. He said the house is too big for one person and a dog." She paused. "He talked for 11 minutes. He usually talks for 12. He was in a hurry. He had a dinner reservation." I knelt down to check Benny. His arthritis was worse. His breathing was a little heavier than I liked, but his tail wagged when he saw me, the way it always did, slow and steady, like a metronome set to the speed of unconditional love. Edith sat in her chair and watched me work. Then she said something I will never forget. "Do you know why I love that dog more than my children, Dr. Silva?" I did not answer. It was not a question that wanted an answer, because that dog has never once made me feel like a burden. He has never looked at my house and seen a number. He has never called me for 11 minutes and then hung up because he had somewhere better to be. He just sits here, beside me, every single day, and that is all I ever wanted from any of them. She reached down and stroked Benny's head. "The house is not too big for one person and a dog. The house is exactly the right size. Kenneth just cannot see that because he has already divided it into a dollar amount." That conversation is why Edith changed her will. Not because I influenced her, not because I manipulated her, because her own son measured her home in square footage instead of memories. And she decided that the dog who sat beside her every day deserved more than the son who called for 11 minutes once a month. I cannot make that decision for my clients. I would never try, but I understand it. I understand it in my bones. About 2 years before she died, Edith called me and said she wanted to talk about something important. I drove over expecting a conversation about Benny's care plan. Instead, she sat me down at the kitchen table with the terrible tea and told me she was changing her will. She said she was setting up a trust. $1.8 million. The trust would cover Benny's care for the rest of his life, veterinary expenses, food, housing, a caretaker. She wanted me to be the trustee. She wanted me to manage the money and make sure Benny was taken care of. I said, "Edith, that is a lot of money for a dog." She looked at me over her teacup. "It is not for the dog, dear. It is for the principal. My children do not visit. They do not call. They do not know what Benny eats for breakfast, or where he sleeps, or that he is afraid of thunder. You know all of those things. If my children wanted my money, they should have earned it the way you did, by showing up." I told her I could not accept. It was too much. It would look wrong. Her children would fight it. She said, "I know they will fight it. That is why I'm also making a video." Edith was sharp, sharper than anyone gave her credit for. She had her attorney set up the trust with airtight legal language. She had a doctor evaluate her mental competency. She scored in the 97th percentile for her age group, which she told me with visible satisfaction. And she recorded videos, not one, several. Over the course of 18 months, she recorded herself explaining her decisions, her relationship with her children, and her relationship with me and Benny. She did this because she knew, the way sharp old women always know, that the moment she died, her children would come for the money, and she wanted to be ready. Edith passed in her sleep on a March morning. Benny was on the bed beside her. I got the call from her neighbor, who had a key. I drove over and sat with Benny for a long time. He knew. Dogs always know. He put his head on the empty side of the bed and did not move for hours. The will was read. Kenneth, Diane, and Walter Jr. received equal shares of the remaining estate, approximately $600,000 total. The $1.8 million went into Benny's trust with me as trustee. Kenneth filed a lawsuit within 2 weeks. His attorney, a man named Paul Henderson, argued that I had manipulated Edith through her emotional attachment to the dog. He called it undue influence through a companion animal. He actually used the phrase, "She brainwashed my mother through a dog." Henderson argued that Edith was mentally diminished, that she was emotionally dependent on Benny, and that I had exploited that dependency to insert myself into her estate planning. He presented a narrative of a calculating veterinarian who saw a vulnerable old woman and engineered a payday. My attorney, a man named Victor Reyes, presented 6 years of veterinary records showing consistent professional care. He presented the mental competency evaluation, showing Edith was sharper than 97% of people her age. He presented billing records showing I had charged Edith standard veterinary rates for every visit. No discounts, no favors, nothing that suggested a financial relationship beyond a doctor and patient. Then he played the videos. The first video was from 2 years before Edith's death. She was sitting in her living room, Benny at her feet. She looked at the camera with clear eyes and a steady voice. "My name is Edith Monroe. I am 86 years old. I am of sound mind. I am making these recordings because I know my children will contest my will. They always do what is expected when money is involved, but they never do what is expected when love is involved." She reached down and scratched Benny's ear. "Dr. Silva has come to my house every 2 weeks for 4 years. She has treated my dog, sat at my table, listened to my stories, and never once asked me for anything. My son Kenneth calls once a month and talks for 12 minutes. I time it. Diane sends flowers twice a year. Walter has not been here in 3 years." She paused. "If my children loved Benny the way Dr. Silva loves Benny, the way she carries him up the stairs and sits with him during storms, I would not need to leave my money to a dog, but they do not. So I am." The second video was recorded 6 months before her death. Edith was thinner, frailer, but her voice was the same. "I want to be very clear. Dr. Silva did not ask for this money. She told me not to do it. She said it was too much and it would cause problems. I told her that is exactly why I am doing it. Because the people who deserve things never ask for them, and the people who ask for things rarely deserve them." She looked directly at the camera. "Kenneth, if you are watching this in a courtroom, I want you to know that I love you, but love is not a bank account you can ignore for years and then withdraw from when it suits you. You did not earn this money. Benny did, by being here, every day, no exceptions." The courtroom was silent. Kenneth was looking at the floor. Diane was crying. Walter Jr. was not present. He had not come to the hearing. Henderson asked for a recess. The judge denied it. The judge ruled in my favor. The trust stood. Benny's $1.8 million was protected. She said from the bench, "Mrs. Monroe was not manipulated. She was neglected by her children and loved by her veterinarian. Her decision to leave money and trust for her dog was not irrational. It was the most rational response to years of being treated like she did not matter by the people who were supposed to matter most." Benny lived for another 14 months after Edith died. I took care of him. He lived in my house, slept at the foot of my bed, and ate the same breakfast Edith used to make him every morning. When he passed, I held him the way I had held him 100 times before, gently, quietly, with my hand on his chest so I could feel his heartbeat slow and stop. The remaining trust funds, per Edith's instructions, were donated to 3 animal shelters and a veterinary school scholarship fund for students from low-income backgrounds. Kenneth received nothing additional. Neither did Diane or Walter Jr. I still make house calls. I still drive the Honda CR-V. I still keep treats in the glove box. And every time I walk into a home where an old person sits alone with an old dog, I think of Edith. I think of the terrible tea and the Jeopardy answers and the way she scratched Benny's ear while she told me stories about Walter. If you are listening to this and you have a parent you have not visited, but they're sitting in a house you grew up in, a father staring at a phone that does not ring, go, drive there, walk in, sit down, drink the terrible tea. Because one day, someone else will sit at that table, and the money you thought was yours will belong to a dog. Their lawyer held up a photograph of a t-shirt and said, "Your Honor, this design is a common artistic motif. Flowers and skulls have existed in art for centuries. My client was inspired by a general aesthetic, not by this woman's work." He said it with the smooth confidence of a man who had practiced that sentence in front of a mirror. I was sitting at the table looking at a photograph of my art, drawn with my hands, transferred to skin with my needles, printed on a $200 t-shirt by a company that had never met me. never asked permission, and never paid me a dime. And sitting behind me in the gallery were 3 of my clients who had driven hours to be there, wearing short sleeves in February so the judge could see the proof. My name is Jade. I am 27 years old. I am a tattoo artist. I have been tattooing since I was 19 when I apprenticed at a shop in Brooklyn called Iron Rose, owned by a woman named Mika, who taught me that a tattoo is not decoration. It is a contract between the artist and the body. It is permanent, it is personal, and it is art. I need to say that clearly because the man on the other side of the courtroom was about to argue that it is not. I work at a small studio now, my own place. I rent a single room in a building that also houses a yoga studio and a vintage record shop. My waiting list is 8 months long. I design every piece from scratch. I do not use flash sheets or pre-made templates. Every client gets an original design based on their story, their body, their vision. I sketch it by hand, refine it digitally, and then transfer it to skin. No 2 pieces are the same. My style is distinctive. I combine botanical, illustration, detailed realistic flowers with geometric frameworks and occasional skull imagery drawn from Mexican folk art traditions. It is a specific look. People find me because of it. They travel from other states. They send me photographs of their grandmother's gardens and their loved ones' favorite flowers, and they say, "Make this permanent." And I do. I also document everything, every sketch, every design, every tattoo. I photograph the original drawing with a timestamp. I photograph the stencil on the skin before I start. I photograph the finished tattoo. I file a certificate of authenticity with each client, a signed document that records the date, the design, and confirms that the artwork is an original creation by Jade Nakamura. My clients keep copies. I keep copies. It is how I protect my work. I want to tell you what it feels like to see your art on someone else's body, not stolen art, the real thing, the art you created, placed there with consent and trust. And 4 hours of concentrated work. Marcus was my 4th client ever. He was 22. A musician, and he wanted something that represented his mother, who had died when he was 16. She loved peonies. She grew them in the backyard. He used to pick them for her when he was little, and she would put them in a jar on the kitchen table. He sat in my chair for 4.5 hours. He did not flinch. He did not complain. He just sat there and told me stories about his mother while I worked. He told me about the time she danced in the rain with him in the backyard. He told me about the peanut butter sandwiches she made with the crusts cut off. He told me about the last thing she said to him, which was, "Be gentle with the world, baby. It is more fragile than it looks." When I finished the tattoo and showed him in the mirror, he cried. Not because it hurt, because it was his mother's flower on his skin. Forever. I cried too. That is what tattooing is. It is not decoration. It is memory made permanent. It is love written in ink. When I saw that same peony on a $200 t-shirt in a fashion brand's online store, I felt something I cannot easily describe. Violation comes close, but it was deeper than that. It was like someone had reached into Marcus's grief and monetized it. They took a flower that represented a dead mother and printed it on fast fashion for people who would wear it once and throw it away. That is why I sued. Not just for the money, not just for the principal, for Marcus, for Leah, for David, for every person who sat in my chair and trusted me with something permanent and personal. Their stories were in those designs, their losses, their love, and someone had taken all of that and put a price tag on it. When Marcus stood up in that courtroom and rolled up his sleeve, he was not just showing a tattoo, he was showing his mother's peony, the one she grew in the backyard, the one he used to pick. And he was saying, with his body, "This is mine. This is hers, and you do not get to take it." That is the most powerful testimony I have ever seen. Not words, not documents. A man standing in a courtroom with his sleeve rolled up, carrying his mother on his skin. About a year ago, I was scrolling through a fashion website when I saw something that made my stomach drop. A t-shirt, $200. The brand was Vex Collective, a high-end streetwear label that had been gaining traction with celebrities and influencers. The design on the shirt was a peony surrounded by geometric hexagons with a small skull at the center. It was my design, not inspired by, not similar to, mine. The exact peony I had drawn for a client named Marcus 3 years earlier, the same petal arrangement, the same leaf structure, the same hexagonal framework I had developed over months of experimentation, the same skull, down to the crack in the left temple that I had added because Marcus said he wanted something that looked beautiful and broken at the same time. I kept scrolling. There were 4 more designs. A chrysanthemum with triangular geometry. That was from a piece I did for a woman named Leah. A rose with a moth. From a piece for a client named David. A lotus with overlapping circles. From a piece for a client named Suki. And a dahlia with honeycomb patterns. From a piece I did for myself on my own forearm. 5 designs. 5 of my original artworks. Printed on shirts, hoodies, and tote bags, retailing for between $150 and $300 each, sold in 12 countries. With my name nowhere, I did not sleep that night. I sat at my desk and pulled out every original sketch. I compared them to the products on the website. The match was exact, not similar composition. Exact, line for line, curve for curve. The only difference was color. They had changed my black ink designs to various colorways for the clothing. But the drawings were mine. I contacted an intellectual property attorney named Rachel Bloom. She took one look at my files and said, "This is one of the clearest cases of copyright infringement I have ever seen." She also said, "But they are going to argue that tattoo designs are not copyrightable. Be prepared for that fight." We filed a lawsuit against Vex Collective and its founder, a man named Adrian Cole. Rachel's filing included every original sketch, every timestamped photograph, every client certificate of authenticity. The evidence was comprehensive. Adrian's lawyer, a man named Gregory Strauss from a fashion industry firm, filed a motion to dismiss. His core argument: tattoo designs are functional body art and do not qualify for copyright protection. He also argued that the designs were common floral motifs available in the public domain. The judge denied the motion. We went to hearing. I showed up with Rachel and my portfolio case. Adrian showed up with Strauss and a graphic designer who was prepared to testify that the designs were original creations of the Vex Collective design team. Strauss went first. He presented the clothing line. He presented mood boards that the design team had allegedly created. He presented a timeline showing when the designs were developed internally. He argued that tattoo designs exist on human bodies and therefore cannot be copyrighted in the traditional sense. He said, with a straight face, "Flowers and skulls have existed in art for centuries." Rachel stood up. She started with my sketches. She showed the originals, hand-drawn, dated, signed. She showed the digital refinements. She showed the stencil photographs on each client's skin. She showed the finished tattoo photographs. Then she showed the side-by-side comparisons. My original peony next to the Vex t-shirt design. My chrysanthemum next to theirs. My rose, my lotus, my dahlia. 5 designs, 5 exact matches. Strauss argued they were coincidental similarities. Rachel pulled up the details. The crack in the skulls. Left temple, identical in both my tattoo and the shirt. The specific number of petals on the peony, 17, which is not standard in botanical illustration and was a deliberate choice I made based on Marcus's request. The angle of the moth's wings on the rose design, 11 degrees off center. A detail I remembered because Leah had asked me to adjust it twice. 17 petals, 11 degrees. These are not coincidences. These are signatures. Then Rachel called her witnesses. Marcus stood up first. He walked to the front of the courtroom, rolled up his left sleeve, and showed the judge the peony tattoo on his forearm. 3 years old, healed and settled into the skin. Rachel placed the t-shirt next to his arm. The judge leaned forward and examined both. Leah went next. Her chrysanthemum was on her shoulder blade. She turned around and pulled the collar of her shirt down so the judge could see. Rachel held up the hoodie design beside it. David went last. His rose and moth covered his entire right bicep. He flexed slightly, not to show off, just to flatten the skin so the details were clear. Rachel placed the tote bag design next to his arm. 3 human beings, standing in a courtroom in February with their sleeves rolled up, carrying the proof on their bodies. The judge examined each tattoo alongside the corresponding product. She spent several minutes on each one. Then she turned to Strauss. "Counselor, your client's graphic designer testified that these designs were created internally by the Vex Collective team. Can you explain how the team independently produced designs that are identical down to a 17 petal count and an 11-degree wing angle to tattoos that have existed on these individuals' bodies for 1 to 3 years prior to your client's product launch?" Strauss said, "Your Honor, we would request a brief. I'm not asking for a recess. I'm asking for an explanation." Strauss looked at Adrian. Adrian looked at the table. No explanation came. The judge ruled in my favor. She found that my tattoo designs were original creative works entitled to full copyright protection. She awarded damages for every product sold bearing my artwork, plus additional penalties for willful infringement. She also ordered Vex Collective to destroy all remaining inventory and remove the designs from every platform. She said, from the bench, "A tattoo is art. It is conceived by an artist, drawn by an artist, and permanently applied to a human canvas by an artist. The fact that it exists on skin rather than on paper does not diminish its originality or its legal protection. What Vex Collective did was not inspiration. It was theft." After the hearing, Marcus, Leah, and David found me in the hallway. Marcus said, "You know, I always told people this tattoo was one of a kind. Now I have legal proof." Leah said, I drove 4 hours to show a judge my shoulder. Worth it. David just held up his arm and said, nobody copies. This, I still tattoo. Every day. I still document everything. I still file certificates of authenticity. But now, every client gets an additional notice at the bottom of their certificate. It says, this design is the original copyrighted artwork of Jade Nakamura. Any reproduction without written permission is subject to legal action. And if someone copies my work again, I know exactly what I will do. I will bring the proof, the sketches, the photographs, the timestamps, and the people wearing my art will stand up and show the world what the truth looks like when it is written on skin.